around for a little bit over 6 years. Most of my team is very experienced, coming from different backgrounds, anything from ethnography like Rick here, and Jonathan, who really comes from a design background, who's crossed over to research. So they come in with really just great knowledge to really bring to the table. A little bit more about who's here with us today. Jonathan Knopf, he's one of my senior researchers. He's been part of my team for over about 3 years now, 2 to 3 years. And he, like I said earlier, he's coming from a design background. He also, because of that, it's been really phenomenal for clients to get actionable recommendations. He's really known for his, he's a strategic thinker, forward thinker, and I love that about him. And one of the things that he's really great at is really taking any type of study and making it really design a perspective that really gets to the bottom of what the client is needing from that perspective. He works in a number of different industries, and he's now working at a medical device company in a sort of a longer-term engagement, doing a lot of really great research. He's done work with us with some of our e-commerce clients. He's done work in financial clients, so it's a number of different streams, gaming, and the like. Rick is with me a little over a year. He's been a phenomenal add to my team. He's really a phenomenal qualitative researcher, one of the best moderators I know out there. He really knows how to engage people during the studies, and so we're really proud to have him part of the team. And both of these guys are baseball players on the side, so they're sporty guys, and so we do a lot of stuff in sort of also in sports and types of athletic kind of things, and so they've been a great add in that perspective as well. So with that, a little bit about me, just before we get started. I founded this about 6 years ago, and part of one of the missions we have as a company is to create new methods that really make sense so that our clients are able to really get to what they need. And because of that, let's start with a little quick story. So how did this come to fruition? A little over a year ago, we were discussing that some of our research, especially when we were doing out-of-the-box experience, needed a way to really capture what was happening, right? And so from there, we thought, well, in the typical Think Aloud protocol, it's very cut and dry, right? So people are thinking what they're doing, but they're not giving you really where they're frustrated. And because we do a lot of journey mapping work, and because we do a lot of work that's around understanding where the moments of truth are, we started thinking, okay, how do we really get at that emotional journey? And so because of that, we started formulating what we're going to present today to you. Anything you want to add, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, when we're doing qualitative research and we're in that Think Aloud protocol, a lot of times it becomes repetitive. You're asking people to kind of rate their experience on a scale of 1 to 7, and we'll do some exercises to kind of demonstrate where those challenges come up. But what we wanted was something more real-time, even within the task level, not just post-task, and something that would make it a little more interactive and something a little more fun. So between the three of us, we were brainstorming all different types of methods that we can use to kind of show those triggers, whether it was audio or a visual trigger, and things that could make it a bit more exciting for the participant.
I would also say for the people who are observing, we'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is really indicative of just the Keyline way. The culture that we have here, our senior staff, and especially Anya as a CEO, really sort of creates this culture of, how can we present sort of actionable feedback? How can we allow our clients to be able to sort of feel that they're in the room and understand exactly what their participants are talking about? So from our experience, we get a lot more engagement from our stakeholders in the back room. They really get to feel like they're participating and understand exactly where those moments of truth are that perhaps is inaudible or sometimes not as clear to be able to pick up if you were just doing a regular Think Out Loud protocol. So the best way to kind of communicate these ideas is a fun way to do a little bit of an experiment here. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention Doc Brown, my favorite scientist of all time. He's real. He's a real scientist for anyone out there. So let's go ahead and take a quick moment to understand exactly what we're going to be doing here. And we'd like to get your interaction. So we'll actually be using the audience to take part in this part of the experiment. So first things first, as UX researchers, we're going to set the scale for you. So I'd like for you to imagine a scale of 1 to 7. Where 1 is going to be very unsatisfied, 4 is going to be neutral, and 7 is going to be very satisfied. So for the next couple minutes here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be showing you a series of images, And what we'd like for you to do as the audience is interact and give us your rating of your experience based on the scale you see in front of you. So we'll give you about 15 seconds to enter your responses, and we'll give you about 5 seconds to actually view the image. Ready to go? Let's get started. So this is part of my new diet regimen that I'm actually eating. It's high in protein and low in fat, so let me know how you feel about that. And we'll give you about 15 seconds from this point to go ahead and give a response. Cue the music. Oh, not really a singer, I'm more of a researcher, but that's me. Okay, folks, so here's the next image. We'll give you about 2 or 3 seconds to take a look at that. And then, like we said, same as before, we'll give you 15 seconds to cue in your response. If you notice, we have the same scale from a 1 to 7 basis. So
You should be able to click on the screen and click submit at the number versus putting it in the Q&A. So I see some of them coming up through Q&A. So just click on the radio button. If you're having issues, please let us know via the Q&A, but you should be able to click, like if you're neutral, you click a 4, etc.
Yeah. These polls are interactive, so we'll actually be seeing the responses in real time. And please feel free to let us know if you have any questions. So here's our next photo. Let us know what you think. Like we said, 15 seconds before, you can go ahead and cue your response in directly into the poll on the screen. And go ahead and click the submit button when you're done. Seeing some good responses in? Okay. Who put this one? I didn't see this one. This one's.
That's a cute.
So what are we thinking, folks? 15 seconds. Don't be shy.
The next one's a great one.
Don't bias it.
There we go. Good feedback.
We'll see what the emotional response is, but it's my contribution.
Absolutely. So like we said, 15 seconds, folks. Just a couple more. Make sure to click submit when you're done. Ooh. That's my kind of picture. I like that one. All right, folks, 15 seconds. Getting some good responses in. How about that one?
It's athletes who definitely know that one.
Absolutely. Know that feeling. Last one, folks. So like we said, 15 seconds. Give you folks a little bit of time to submit that one. So at this point, what I'd like for you to do is let's have the entire experience of all the photos that you've seen, and I'd like for you to give that experience itself a rating of 1 to 7. So we'll go ahead and give you the poll again, and at this point we'll give you another 10 seconds just to go ahead and cue your response, and then we'll kind of debrief as to actually what happened here. So at this point, folks, what we've tried to simulate in this scenario is using the mood meter. What we're actually able to do is ascertain those specific pain points and the actual changes in mood from one second to the other. So,
and I think part of the reason why you want to do that is we all know that if you have someone thinking out loud and you're trying to have, you typically wait till the end to ask them, how easy was that? How easy was it to do X, Y, and Z? Was it efficient? Are you satisfied? And what you get is sort of that additive experience, right? Sort of that final, what does that mean? But what you miss with just doing sort of the traditional way of doing, sort of thinking out loud protocol and then waiting till the end to kind of ask those, sort of quantitative, qualitative kind of questions, you're missing out sort of that along the journey. What is the point? So, so if there's something about the experience that at a certain point is really dropping because it was something that was like that blue screen, then you missed that blue screen. You got the additive version of the experience.
And going back to our initial sort of idea, which was talking about the out-of-box experience, if there's one particular pain point that we're missing throughout that experience, and at the end of the day we get a positive overall rating, well, what was that moment of truth? What was that one point that we missed? And that's really the actionable feedback that we're hoping to give back to our clients.
Yeah, and to add one more thing to that, when you're doing that type of qualitative research and you're hoping to get things from participants, you don't want to be asking them to think aloud or pushing them to speak up, because that you're potentially biasing whether or not they're even giving you an emotional response or giving you some kind of feedback. So we developed a way that we can allow them to in an introvert fashion, give us feedback.
Sure. And from a moderator's perspective, it's a phenomenal tool to be able to know exactly when to probe. If you're seeing that minute change in rating going from positive to negative, that's a great cue from a moderator's perspective to understand when can we go in and actually ask a couple more questions. So at this point, what we'd like to do is go ahead and show you some of those emotions again, and we're actually going to give you some real-time feedback to how you responded. So we remember seeing this picture. How did our audience feel about that photo? So we're seeing a couple of negatives.
Most of the people gave it 3s, looks like.
Yeah.
So
maybe there's some grasshopper eaters in the audience.
looks like we got it one, at least a couple. There's 8% of it is a grasshopper eater there.
Interesting.
6s and 7s, anyways. So wow.
Shocking.
Shocking.
Let's move on to the next. This has got to be heartwarming. So there we go.
Yeah.
So that's more indicative of what we were expecting, but interesting feedback to see how participants attributed that one negative response. So is that a feeling of happy sad? My girlfriend has happy sad. Is that a real thing? A happy sad? Like when you cry in a movie or something? Maybe that's what that is.
That's another good point. It's difficult to know if you look at it after. You know?
Sure. So at that point in time, if I saw a negative response, I as a moderator would want to know exactly what's going on there.
That's the cue to probe in.
Absolutely.
So that one's all over the map. We have some thrill seekers, and we have some people who are just in the middle, and some people are like, yes, that's awesome, or no way. There's a lot of shark fightings going on.
I know, especially in South Florida right now.
Yeah, so.
Okay, this one's got to be across the board. This is everyone. No, we had some sad faces. I don't know.
Well, it's a lonely puppy.
Right? Are they attributing the sadness to the puppy, or what's going on here?
Yeah.
So, like we said before, it's eye-opening in general. One would assume that you would get a typical response, but to actually see the different responses, it's eye-opening.
Yeah.
This is all you, Jonathan.
Yeah, I can't imagine someone liking that picture.
Looks like we got one.
There's one person.
Someone.
Maybe if they're in
people,
QA and they're getting paid to find crashes.
There you go.
That's one way. I know.
Job security.
I was in that mode for a while.
Job
QA.
security. So here are some other thrill seekers. Let's see who enjoyed that one. All right, so we've got a couple cliffhangers. Nice.
Yeah, that would be a one for me.
I'm just tired looking at that photo. Oh, so that one's pretty
all over the map.
all over the map.
Yeah.
Interesting. Last one.
And that's really a challenge that we see with a lot of our clients too, is how they quantify that certain type of emotional response too. So that's why the cue itself is great to kind of dig in a little bit and find out the details of why they felt that way.
Absolutely. And the idea that these images are coming sort of in a continuum, you have that range of emotions. So how long did it take from a participant to have a negative experience to that uptick back to a positive experience?
Yeah.
So which image was that inflection point going from up to down, and how do you attribute that response is really interesting from a data perspective.
Yeah. Good point.
We got one more slide. So at this point, well actually I kind of snuck that one in. That one was one of my favorites. So at this point in time, what we wanted to be able to compare and what we want to be able to sort of display in this type of scenario is there's an ability to capture those moments of truth and being able to get that minute changes in positive experience, as opposed to asking one generalized questions that's sort of summative at the end of an experience that won't really capture those innate changes. So this is what we feel has been one of the best methods to be able to capture that type of data.
Yeah, so let's see what they rated for the
Overall.
overall experience.
Right.
So most of the time they had
Yeah,
positive.
very interesting.
Couple
So
neutrals, and then
Yeah.
everybody was ticking to the positive.
amazing. So you look at this, and you would imagine that there were no negative experiences almost if you're just looking at the summative.
Yeah, and
So
that's the challenge we
That's
have.
really
right? So
that's
then
a
the
great
client
example.
walks away and thinks, "Oh wow, everything is good and dandy."
Yeah,
I mean, we
everything's
have
great.
everybody's either neutral or positive about the experience that we're all experiencing, and that's not really where.
Wow.
That's how you don't tell where your opportunity is. What
Sure.
we're trying to look for from a user experience, whether you're doing journey mapping or you're doing just qualitative research to understand that different journeys, is trying to find those moments where there is sort of a drop, and why is happening, because that's where your greatest opportunity to really fix it and then change that experience and then really impact these scores. And then in that case, really get additional, get a bigger percentage of folks who are in 6s and 7s versus having, a lot of them in 4s and 5s in this case. One thing before we move forward, I want to just say a couple things. On the left-hand side is there's a Q&A panel, and that's going to be used for any questions you have throughout the time. Like right now, we had somebody ask, is there any reason why we're going for a 7-point scale? You can use any scale you want for this. We find that for sort of qualitative research, a 7-point scale is sort of best overall from getting not too narrow, and then also not getting too spread out where we might have an 11-point scale or a 9-point scale, and then people have a hard time knowing the difference between what is a 6, a 7, or an 8. So in our case, depending on the research and then also depending on what the needs are, we find the 7 works best overall. But in this case, we've done things where we've done it for a 10-point scale. We start people at a 10. They don't know that they're at a 10 sometimes, and then they go up and down the scale. We'll talk a little bit about what that is during the time. So back to that sort of thing. Q&A on the left-hand side. And then there's also Twitter on the right. One of the things we're going to do to make this even more interactive is we want you to tweet. So you can actually enter any tweets in there. We're going to do a random pick of the folks that actually tweet during the session, and at the end, we're going to direct message one person and giving them a $20 gift certificate of their choice. Whatever, if you like Amazon, Starbucks, if you like ice cream, you figure it out. $20. Yes. So, okay. So let's go ahead and move forward.
Sure.
Okay, so what we're going to be talking about in the next few slides is these changes and how they occur throughout a task. So as we saw, the example that we posed actually worked out really well to demonstrate the problem that we see a lot of times. We really want to capture what's happening throughout the task, not just at the end of the task. So how do we measure those changes that happen during a task without leading, without pushing for them to respond? And in this think aloud protocol that has people that are introverted really not giving you very much feedback. So I'll show you some examples of what, as UX researchers, we would love to hear from these participants during think aloud protocol. Things like, oh, I would really like it if they offer this, or I'm really hoping to find something like that, or I hate it when they do things like this. But the reality is what they end up doing is keeping all those thoughts in mind and only just kind of giving out those little pieces. And oftentimes they're doing a task, so they're focusing on the task at hand and not really focusing on giving you that type of verbal feedback that you're looking for.
I mean, even when you have a wonderful moderator like someone like Rick or Jonathan, it still becomes an issue, right? It's not really about, granted, versus other people, they might not have as good of an experience, but the reality is you're going to get some participants who are just not going to articulate what they're thinking or doing. And so even what they're feeling. And really what we're trying to get at is, I'm not worried if they're not talking as much, as long as they're giving me some sort of cue. And yeah, we could all say that we're trying to read cues of the body, etc. The reality is, your participants 2 minutes, 3 minutes, so you don't know what their baseline is. Sure. And you're assuming that you're going to be able to read them. And yeah, you can look at some traditional reads of different people, the way that they position themselves, but it's still a difficult task, even for your most experienced moderators.
And how do you quantify that too?
Yeah. And so, is that good or bad? Is they kind of smirk, roll their eyes, and the whole point is when people say, this is different. Well, is it different good or different bad? Right. What does that mean? So
add to that some of the cultural implications that goes in with testing internationally. Yeah, you really have some sort of cultural biases and filters that participants are innately just attuned to being able to be more respectful, or they tend to be a little more reclusive when it comes to giving criticism. So this sort of quantification of feelings allows us to be able to get into a little more of the details that the respondents are perhaps a little reluctant to give.
Yeah, especially in Asia, where we find that people are very, even where sometimes in Japan they wear the face mask and things like that, it becomes a little bit harder to read what they're thinking, doing, and this helps.
So as you all know, if you've done qualitative research before, Think Aloud protocol is widely used as a way to encourage participants to speak about what they're doing, what they're looking for, what they're thinking while they're doing a task. So there's two different types of think aloud protocol, and we'll discuss some of the benefits and disadvantages of each type. With concurrent think aloud protocol, that's when you're asking them to do that think aloud during the task. So the thoughts are really fresh in their memory, and it ties that emotion into the action.
Particularly to that action,
yeah.
Right.
And some of the negatives are it can be a little bit intrusive. You're kind of pushing them or taking the time out of their actual task time to give feedback, and it requires them to really articulate emotions and really give that verbal description of how they're feeling or what they're looking for, and it's pretty difficult to quantify that in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about a retrospective think aloud protocol, it's got some positives in the sense that it's uninterrupted and you have a better task time accuracy, which could be very helpful in some scenarios. But unfortunately, the reality is you have some sort of memory decay, and there is an opportunity for participants to over-embellish their own success and have an opportunity to say, well, although I struggled mightily within the first couple steps, ultimately I was able to succeed, but we're sort of missing the fact that there was actually moments of time where they could have abandoned a task or potentially returned an item if you're considering out-of-box experience. And it also misses those subtle emotional changes that we've been talking about earlier.
Definitely.
So the challenge, so in our head we had a challenge. We wanted something simple. Yes, you can really measure emotional responses using biometrics, eye tracking. In fact, we have Andrew, who is our whiz at that, right?
We want something not that intrusive.
Yeah, we wanted something that was, exactly not as intrusive. We wanted something
that's not repetitive. At the end of the day, if you have 14 tasks and you're sitting with participants for an hour, the standard question of how do you feel about this task, it gets repetitive, and you start to see emotional responses of participants who are just fatigued, and at the end of the day, they just don't want to have any more. They don't have any more feedback to give.
Yeah, and I'm all about the analytics too. So I wanted something that I could quantify and I can give my clients the type of actionable responses based on numbers, not just something that we're giving them quotes. It's really difficult to really give them drivers with that.
What I love most is when I'm sitting in the back room that my client's able to see sort of that uptick and downtick in the emotional experience, so it's shareable. So you'll see in a moment how this looks, but the reality is in the back room, what you as a customer are seeing is like, hey, someone added, said that their response was, positive because of something that happened within the task flow. Wonderful, but if something drops, they see that number drop, say from, let's say on a 10-point scale, drops from like maybe a 10 all the way down to 4. There's something major happening there. And maybe they didn't say it because maybe it's something that happened because they ended up like, they didn't know where to go next, and or maybe something that was, well, that's more obvious, right? But we're talking about something that's subtle for someone to say, but there's something that just is really just frustrating for them. You'll at least get that. What I'd love to is, as a moderator, right, you're able to kind of see that. And maybe you don't probe right there because you don't want to interrupt something that, especially when they're using retrospective. But now here, I have to come back. I have to check on this one because something happened right here that really killed their experience.
And cost of implementation is near zero.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity for this to be customizable to any particular type of research, and really the costs are minorly prohibitive. They don't exist at this point. You can develop your own tool. We've actually developed and customized our own tool based off of the type of experiment that we're doing. But for any scenario, this is totally an affordable solution.
What I love best, we presented this advanced topic at the UXPA Boston, and we were there surrounded with a lot of really thought leaders in our own field, and everybody just kind of paused and said, wow, this is really brilliant. This is not like, this really doesn't, it's not anything,
Simplicity.
It's so simple that we're surprised when nobody has ever thought about it before, but it's actually so actionable and so easy. And I think for us, because we're doing so much work in customer journey mapping, it was sort of a natural fallout as as that work started really upticking.
Absolutely.
Because we were like, how do we get this? How do we get to this emotional response? A lot of times I see these journey maps from other folks, and they just try to map that experience, but there's no real task-based data that really helps them quantify it, and this is one way to do that. So.
Yeah, and as a research agency, Keyline is really good at just taking the problem or the challenge at hand and finding the best possible solution. So that's really what we do best.
It's one of our values.
That's
how I hire my people.
Add to affordability, just because this task is simple does not mean we're not getting actionable feedback. Jonathan will actually go into some great detail about the type of feedback and the type of results that you get from implementing just a simple solution like the mood meter.
Try not to bore you too much with the mathematics.
All right. So
some of the tactical requirements that we had to consider with the mood meter, we wanted to find out the positive or negative inputs, whether it was a great experience, whether it was a poor experience, something that made them maybe feel unsatisfied or more satisfied with a potential product, and something that's tallying the response as we go, but also allowing us to kind of visually see, maybe not the participant seeing, but at least allowing us to see and have some kind of recording of that type of mood change.
Go ahead. What I love best is when Jonathan came up with something brilliant, which he called the mood swings. So he actually, our like report bio is like this mood swing. So why don't you talk a little bit about that, Rick?
Sure. So the mood swings actually, it's the ability to quantify those changes in emotions. And what we're looking for are those subtle inflection points of a positive uptick to a negative downturn. And what was that point? And we can start to develop pretty early on in the research some trends that you can start to point out. Typically, we have our stakeholders who are in the back room, and we want a debrief session where we get very interactive and we like to understand what are we really taking away from this session today. And
one of the things that I thought was also brilliant that this team came up with is we were integrating with Murray, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we did is we used the audio uptick of like the actual our version, and we'll show you what we used. It's basically a solution out the door from another vendor, but you'll see it. It was a reuse of that. But long story short, we were able to tie in that little chick that would happen when someone would change it from a positive to a negative, and then tag that to basically to the actual
right. So when you're recording in Moray,
recording.
It allows you to tag based off of an auditory response. So with the mood meter sitting right in the room with the participants, you're actually able to tell exactly when an uptick happened, when a downtick happened. So that auditory response is attributed back to Moray, and we're able to tag those in real time.
So here it is, guys. Want to say it, John?
All right. So yeah, like we mentioned that we came up with a software solution to do this, and really it could be done in so many different ways, but we just wanted to, we had so many ideas. Like we thought about that buzzer from
Taboo. The game
any kind of buzzer, but that's not giving us the type of positive and negative. Mm-hmm. So we found a simple counter. We didn't want something that only counts upwards. We wanted something that gives that the variance in the positive and the negative. So, and this also allowed us to tally the mood while we got the positive and negative. And the little click that we mentioned also gives that type of interactive feedback. It's kind of rewarding in a sense. Like it's almost like a gamifying the experience.
So one of the things we should say here is that the method is really what we're talking through, right? Which is a way to capture sort of that uptick, that negative and positive uptick from an emotional response perspective during your research, okay? So, yes, you could use this. For all intents and purposes, you could use a buzzard. You could use whatever you want. In fact, you can either use paper and pencil to have somebody crossing up and down and maybe make a tick when they want to move it down and move it up and things like that. But the reality is there is some basic, counters that are out there. The first one we used had numbers. Later on, we realized we didn't even have to show the numbers in the front room. So that's how we started creating our own solution of that. Because out of the box, you might have a little bit of biasing that happens with using a counter that shows numbers. So we took that out from the participant view, and in the back room, we still show the client how that's changing, and we start everybody at a 10, which is at sort of they're high, and then you'll see things go down to negative numbers even from a 10, and you'll see things go up, but it'll kind of give us that sort of as our starting point in that perspective.
And at this point, we're actually showing the mood meter on a mobile device, but we've actually extrapolated it out to a web-based version. So we actually have solutions for different types of platforms that we're encountering with our clients.
Yeah. So when you're running even a remote study, that's a great thing. So you don't really know. Yeah, you can see what they're thinking, but you can actually have them just have a simple plus and minus on the top of the screen, which is what our solution is, and then plus up when they're like just with their mouse and negative, and that just gives us a cue, and then we're already knowing, we're dictating that, and we're tying it into our data, so it's just great.
Yeah, and we're all about custom research too, so any method or any type of scenario where you want to do that type of real-time tracking, we can adjust it and come up with a solution that works best.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So I'll talk a little bit about a case study where we did this for smartphones. We did a specific study to kind of look at the packaging, unpackaging, and the first-time use experience of a smartphone. So, we were looking at the marketing, the instructions, the manuals, hardware, software, how it feels, how you use it, and really just trying to find out the little ups and downs that happens and what could potentially make someone want to return this device after just that first-time experience.
With all these potential variables, it's just helpful to be able to hone in on the very specific moments of truth.
So like Jonathan just said, it was an in-lab study. We had two components. First was we were going to have we had folks come in and they were presented this new package, and we were going to do an OB test, an out-of-the-box experience test, and then we also did a mobile diary study that was 30 days, and really we were trying to understand if there was any kind of remorse during that purchase experience. And so along it, there's some things that came right out of the box, some opportunities there, and then things that we found later that we were able to show.
Sure.
So for the out-of-the-box experience, we had multiple components to that research. We don't use strictly mood meter as a standalone. It's typically something that we add in. We definitely want to get that qualitative, rich why someone experienced, why someone changed the value of their satisfaction at the moment. So we ran in-depth interviews to really get that qualitative portion of it. We tied it in with the mood meter, and we had other things like
the typical parts of the research that you see involve user performance metrics and really being able to understand like an A/B comparison to understand what the flow in emotion was between
their product versus competitive product. So from this perspective, they wanted to understand that. So we obviously recruited people who had one version of a phone and then the other version of a phone, and that comparison of that experience as well also came into play to see if there can be conversion of user types, etc.
Yeah, and something that we use in almost every type of system test is the system usability scale. I have a lot of experience working with that, and it's provided a lot of insight into whether your UI or your application is really easy to use from an intuitive first-time basis, or whether it's something that can be learned. So there are different points within that scale that can really give a bit more detail as to where the problems are in your system.
And one thing I should say is that one of the things we do internally is we have a benchmark. Because we're testing so many different systems across so many different industries, we find that our data is better than it's sort of gathering what the SUS score, so we can give you what is in your industry. Yeah. And in fact, some of our clients didn't have that type of data before, and so they were asking us, what is the SUS, and one product versus the other, and because we do different spectrums, that it's given us a chance to collect that as an aggregate. What is the current state SUS out there for all the experiences, as well as what is specific to industry?
Yeah, and we have a department that's dedicated strictly to competitive benchmarking. If you want that type of research, you can definitely send us an email or reach out to us on Twitter, and we'll provide you any additional info for that.
So let's talk about the actual mood meter itself. So the mood meter in this scenario lived right next to the participant. So our goal was to have something that was minimally intrusive and an interface where the user felt totally confident. So we had this actually placed on an iPhone, and as Anya said, it was something that was totally out-of-the-box solution. We were able to download it to the phone and have it placed right next to the participant. So whenever they would encounter a positive or a negative experience, or a positive negative point in the experience, they would simply just click up or click down. And it's something as simple as that, and not as intrusive, that allowed us to really get some of that qualitative feedback. And as a moderator, I'm looking in to say, well, what's really going on in this scenario? Are we seeing a particular trend relating to the opening experience or relating to the onboarding experience?
Yeah, and I think here the big thing is that from the backroom stage, you're able to see that, right? So where is this point up and down?
Yeah, and for the type of emotional response and setting the stage for this type of out-of-box experience, we had to assume that the participants had just bought the phone and they literally just got the package. But we wanted to start at a base of 10 for this experience because some people getting a new phone, they could be at a 20 or at 100 or go like really insane when when you're getting a new device or something like that. So we're putting a starting point at a 10, not something like this. I don't know if you've seen this video that's been going around, or if we can even play it here. Can't be played, but this is where this kid flips out about his Nintendo 64. But so we're assuming that they recently purchased the device, that they're receiving the package in their home environment, and so they can press plus or minus as many times as they want. We're not restricting any experience to a minimal number of ticks or a maximum number of ticks.
One of the things here too is that you don't necessarily need to start at 10.
Right.
So you can
Yeah.
actually ask. We've done work as well where we tell participants, hey, what is your current perception of this product from 1 to 100, and then we start them at that number.
Yeah,
Sure.
So whatever that is, if they have a really positive perception of this brand, and because they have that halo effect, they might start really high, and then the experience just bombs out because it's bad. Or the other side, they don't know who this brand is, so they're all the way in the bottom, but they like maybe the technology, so maybe they're in the middle, and then they go all the way up on sort of finding out what this is.
And from a moderator perspective, we're typically taking notes in real time, trying to make sure that we attribute one particular task to the next. So being able to see that change, where did the participants start, where did they end, perhaps in task one, and how long does it take to recover to get back to that point of being happy or being satisfied with the purchase.
Because it's ticking and putting a marker in Murray, you now can just add a comment there. So you tick what happened, Obviously, if someone articulates a point there, a comment there.
Sure.
All right. So some of the analytics.
Here's my
I love this part. We came up with the name, the coin phrase of the mood swing, which I'm sure everybody knows. But as a way to determine the difference in the mood that was the before and after. So the mood swing is like if you started at 10, drops to an 8, you have that difference of 2. The severity is, if it's high positive, is it a high negative? So that really gets into the type of impact. And as Rick was mentioning, that recovery time, how long it takes to get you back to that. And then the mood swing impact overall and the total experience was the summation of all those different changes in mood. So I can leave this one off.
It's all you, baby.
So you can see we had that baseline. That's the dotted line at the 10. That's really where they started. You're getting this new device. You're opening up. You can see most people had that really positive first experience, and there were different actions that they took throughout each task. So this is within a task. There are multiple actions that they were doing. Opening the box, reading the manual, getting all the way to the point of a first use. And that entire thing was one task, but there were many actions involved in that. So we were trying to find those little points, which action really dropped them below that baseline or really created that big mood swing that we're looking for.
So we're actually seeing a couple of questions coming in from the audience, and I think one of them is pretty timely. So we were talking about some of the pain points to implementing the mood meter sort of in the actual lab. And I think one that comes to mind that's actually pretty relevant, we'll actually have some participants who either failed to interact with the mood meter or they might have interacted with the mood meter. So I forgot to put something, so they start putting 3 or 4. So as a moderator, it's also something to be a little bit more vigilant about and sort of be on top of what's going on with the participants and being able to remind them in a non-intrusive way to be able to interact with the mood meter, as opposed to waiting towards the end of a task and having them try to recall, and you're sort of defeating the purpose at that point.
Yeah, and someone also asked if there's an app for it. Really, we just came up with an app solution that was already existing, but there's so many different ways of doing it, but really it's the
invention is really the method.
The method, right, and the way that we presented the analytics and presented the quantification of it.
So I mean, for our intensive purposes, we have something we've come up with. There is plenty of things out there that are alternatives to it, but really what we're grabbing here is a way to capture that journey, the emotional journey within a task, a journey itself in a lab setting.
So here we're identifying the negative mood swing. So what was really good about the mood meter is that we can really look at the differences of certain types of user segments. And when you put these things in parallel, the way that these types of segments responded on certain types of actions, and you can start to see where the gaps may be between some of your users, a specific persona, for example, then it really gives you a lot of power to make the changes that would impact your users the most and in the most positive way. So you can see the differences that personas 1, 2, and 3 have, where their mood swings dropped below something critical. It varies between the 3 of them, but you can see the low severity is between a -2 or a 0, but a high severity is when that swing is like a further below than a -2. So they're ticking even more than 2 times. We call that a high severity.
Looks like we just got a question. I'm going to try to read it. It says, "Why are you tracking time as why are you tracking time as one of the variables? Why don't you measure feedback using the time variable?" So they're using we have a time as a variable, okay? And then why aren't we using time as a feedback?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can answer that. So regarding the time, everybody takes different times to do tasks. So that's something that we did think about, and it would be great, ideally, to have a matching total number of time and start to see where those inflection points are. But unfortunately, when someone does a task a little bit longer, it's not necessarily going to match up all the graphs. Somebody could take a little bit longer with this part of the action.
They take another path. If it's just think about it, if it's on a website, they might take path number 1 versus path number 3. But you could very well. But let's just talk about that for a second. You could very well take for all path 1. You could say, let's look at those users that use path 1, and let's look at their journey. And it's okay that the time changes. You just have to be able to donate key points. So like every time they do a specific point within the task, you can line up the specific journeys if you're aggregating at that level.
Yeah, but no, but unfortunately, what happens is you have the perception that has to happen, the cognition of what they're looking at, the actions that they take, and that's unless you start to really restrict the user to a specific time frame for each task. And mind you, these are actions; they're not the task itself. So we're looking at interactions within a task, not the total task time. So that's really where the matchup of the graphs really didn't work as well as we had hoped. But that's if you're using strict adherence to time, it can be done. It can be done where you're overlaying all the graphs and really seeing where the differences are that way.
Yeah, in that case, you have to have the same actions.
Exactly, and everything is timed, and the task has to be stopped at a certain point, and that's not always preferred. We wanted to get the qualitative feedback and really find out where those issues were, and it was more of a dialogue, so it permitted a way of looking at where those changes happened, but also permitting a dialogue so we can find out why that happened.
Got it. Good.
So here we're looking at the overall impact score, and this is what we delivered to our clients. So they were able to look at this side by side and really see what the biggest, the highest severity impact actions were that had to happen within the overall task. So they're looking at this and saying, whoa, Persona 3 really struggled with task 4 or action 4, and look at the impact it made. And Rick was talking about the overall length of that impact.
Absolutely.
How long does it take them to recover from that?
You talk about having a product manager, and is this a software issue? Is this a hardware issue? The different tasks are attributed to different parts of the actual product. So you're actually able to ascertain specifically which part of the process is really the pain point. I think we just had another question come in.
Yeah, you can normalize. That's true. From one for another. That's a good point. You can normalize the points. So we just had the person who asked before ask if you can normalize the points, and that's true. You normalize, and that's what that's exactly right. Yeah.
The great thing about the mood meter is it's a living, breathing tool that we use, and we're constantly evolving. We're constantly changing. We change it to meet our particular client needs. So at the end of the day, this is not something that's set in stone. It's more of an ideology of how to approach a scenario and really deliver that type of feedback to the client.
Yeah, it's quantifying the response, but really we're looking for the why, not just for quantifying it. But this is really a trigger for somebody who's moderating to really say, oh, so why the 2 drops there? Or what was happening there? Let's talk about that a little bit more. And Rick is the expert at really digging into that type of qualitative feedback.
He's the man. He's being modest.
So, these were all really great questions. I appreciate the feedback. And, these things can be customized per use. So it really depends on what you're trying to understand about your users, what you're trying to understand about how to make improvements to your software or your hardware. So there are still some challenges and alternatives that can be done. Like you can do things with eye tracking that could be interesting, that can mark those points. You can use brainwave and facial recognition. All those things really add a strong feature, but they're a little bit more intrusive.
Not necessarily, but they do have a higher cost, right? And
Yeah,
so
right.
And they
Definitely.
hire someone like Andrew on our team to do that.
Right.
In our solution, we're basing it on a smart phone solution, but reality is, going back to the point, it's a method. So
Right.
it doesn't. If you want to go back to the buzzard and just use the buzzard, then you can do that. So the way that we've done it so that we can tie it to Murray and to like the time and to mapping things and really using it, it's easier for us to do it that way because now we have a digitized version of this. But and I think from that, it's going to save you a lot more time and it's going to be more actionable. And we all want as consultants to save back-end time of analysis. So, but it can't be just buzzard or it can be paper and pencil for all you want.
Sure.
Yeah, so hopefully you're not looking like this.
Hopefully.
I know you just came from lunch, so chances are you are like that. Hopefully you have a coffee next to you. If you haven't had Cuban coffee, I recommend it, especially for this time of the day. But yeah, just wanted to get any questions. I think that was an old one.
What are some of the main points you've encountered with the mood meter from a researcher's? What are some of the main points you have encountered with the mood meter from a researcher's perspective? I don't know what
I think
that
it's
question.
the other one.
We have a couple questions coming in, so let's just kind of see.
Elaborate more on where you can present the data.
So let's
Oh,
elaborate more
That's
the
good.
way to present the data from one
Yeah.
report to another. So, well, Jonathan, why don't you do that since you're the mood swing?
Yeah, I mean, that was my favorite part of it, really giving those side by side and showing those segmentation differences. I mean, so much of what we do now is regarding personas and developing those personas and really providing personalization and really trying to get that empathy for the user and understand their needs. So when you start to look at them side by side, there may be changes that are for one type of persona that are not going to work for others. So it really gives that good side-by-side comparison.
Yeah. Anya mentioned a tool like Moray. Moray is incredibly helpful to be able to understand at the end of the day, if we want to highlight just some negative interactions that we had or some negative emotions, the auditory response tied together with Moray allows for that work to be done on the front end as opposed to analyzing all the data on the back end.
Huge.
From a resourcing standpoint, it really enables us to spend more time with the client debriefing and have that real-time data available when we need it, as opposed to having to work with the data for another day or two in the back end.
Yeah, it's like a 60-minute video that you have to go and scrub through or rewatch and find that little clip. Moray does that because we have that tag. It puts it right on there, so we know where those negative drops happen, and we know whether or not it's a minus or a plus. It's not just the audio tick. We see a negative, so then we have a tag that stays there, and we can immediately grab a clip as to what happened.
Right. It's a little more work on the front end, but it's totally time saving, and it's really valuable for our clients to be able to have that type of feedback at the end of the day.
So, Ricky, this is for you. Well, how do clients and stakeholders feel about the data? Is it meaningful or something that they haven't seen before?
Absolutely. So we one of the scenarios that we encountered, we actually had some of our stakeholders in lab, and they were actually able to participate. But unfortunately, the entire product team wasn't able to travel with them. So we actually had the ability to to show the mood meter within our web sharing conferencing tool. And we actually had the team that was overseas able to follow along in real time. And we had questions coming in and feedback saying, we keep seeing pain points coming on in task 2, and we understand that this is a potential software issue. So let's come at the situation and probe a little deeper from the moderator's perspective as to what is actually going on. So the stakeholders actually get really involved, and they're able to sort of give that feedback right in real time.
Yeah, and in particular, the side-by-side one was something that became a highlight of our report, and they felt like it was really informing their broader team as to where the issues are with certain types of users.
For situations such as a beta evaluation where the evaluator is not in the picture during the evaluation, can the mood leader be extended to allow the user to enter optional comments on what is behind their clicks? Yes. Yes? Well, we haven't done it, but that's a good one.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be good if, so like,
So they're
what
adding
they're
qualitative
saying,
feedback to
what they're
their own
saying,
response.
if we have, this solution was in beta testing, let's say a game, right? And we use this as something that can be remotely used. Could they, as you add in plus,
that's what we
then
did.
add a comment?
Yeah, that's kind of what we did with the ethnography.
Yes, that's what
So
we,
for the longitudinal study, we used a method of capturing the mood after certain parts of their.
So for that one, we used True 24. There's something called Experience Fellow, which is also letting you do a little bit of this, where along the journey it does plus and minus.
And it's built in directly to mobile.
It's built in directly to mobile. So there's that out there that I think is really great, because then you can do the plus and minus as you put in a point within your beta tests. So there is things a little bit out there that are out there. We've had to kind of hack the way that we do this, quite frankly, and because of that, we've come up with our own little hack, if you will, but it's working well, because what it does for us, it allows us to then analyze quickly, right? This is pretty straightforward. It's a simple concept. It's really a beautiful concept if you think about it, because really there's nothing that allows you to get that in feedback, but there's nothing really out there that does it perfectly. So we've had to come up with a way to pull it together really quickly, and what's nice is, what I love best when we first did this, to the point of sort of that mood swing and the impact scores, that was so very valuable to this client. Like, that was the moment that we thought, wow, we just came up, we actually just discovered gold. Because it was just amazing. I think it was one of the most amazing, and I've been doing research for over 15 years. I'm telling you, it was brilliant at that point.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's a differentiator for us, and it's something that is not elegant, and it's cost effective to be able to implement, but it allows us to sort of think, for lack of a better term, thinking outside the box in this scenario. It allows us to look at potential solutions and a type of research project that, for all intents and purposes, can be potentially stale. And we get to add our key lime flavor to it, and this is really what key lime is about.
Yeah, and we did this for someone that everybody would know, and when they looked at all the different types of feedback that we gave ethnography videos, we gave qualitative feedback, we gave out-of-the-box experience,
quantifiable metrics,
like everything. This was the one that they really mentioned. Wow, that's really powerful to have these things side by side and showing the different segments and how they responded. So that became the highlight of this report, and it was quite a large report that we did for them. So.
Okay, that basically covers all the questions we have out there. I want to take a moment to thank everyone that's here today. We had over 127 attendees for this webcast. We're going to be broadcasting this if you want to see it at Afterplay, if you weren't able to make it today. But thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy days and schedules to be with us today. And we wish you a great weekend, and hopefully we can chat and talk about implementing one of these solutions or one of these methodologies into your research.
Sure. Yeah, reach out to us on LinkedIn. We love discussing these things. All of our research is customized to fit a client or to fit a problem, to answer questions that you have. So we're happy to have a discussion.
Actually, let's go ahead, and if you have a question related to any of this today and you want to reach out to us, you can email us at info@keylimeinteractive.com. And then we'll target those to the right researcher at that point. So thank you so much.
Thank
you. Have a great day. Bye.